This is Rustin Rose with Metalholic Magazine and Access Entertainment. With us today, the amazing Barney Greenway of Napalm Death. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, thanks for the intro. You give me a bit too much there, to be honest, but there you go.
Well, you know, it's early in the day. We got to get the energy level up and everything. So,
right.
You know, it's funny because as we're here to talk about the new album, Apex Predator Easy Meat, of course, but, you know, you've been in Napalm Death for a quarter century now. Does that seem somewhat surreal?
It does seem surreal when you think about it, but it's been such a varied journey, you know, with twists and turns that time just goes, you know, and before you know it, it's, well, 25 years, I suppose. And it's been an interesting one, which has made the time not drag, you know. I mean, we've seen places that other bands simply don't or won't see, you know, and yeah, I mean, what can I say? You know, it's certainly don't take it for granted, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So the new album is fantastic.
Thank you.
Apex Predator Easy Meat. First off, what's the story? I mean, I know it's the first track on the album, but what's the story behind the artwork, the concept of all of this?
Sure. Sure. Well, I mean, first to say, Rustin, when it's time to kind of, when we've decided that we want to make an album, I'll very quickly get working on a title and, you know, a concept or a non-concept, if you like. And this time around, well, there was one event that was the catalyst, really, which was a building collapsing in Bangladesh. It was called Rana Plaza, the place, and it was a sweatshop, basically. And there were big multinational companies with a stake in this place. But what basically happened was, well, 1,000 to 2,000 people lost their lives or were seriously injured. And it wasn't as if there was no warning. There was big cracks in the structure like a couple of days before, and yet they still sent the people in to work under duress, you know. And of course the inevitable happened, and there you go. But I mean, that was bad enough as it was, but there was other things that kind of really sort of made me think, well, you know, I have to do an expose on this or make it part of the next album, which was that, for first thing, the news coverage, I noticed that the media coverage, when you have a disaster, and compared to other disasters, it just seemed as if it was headline news for a day and then it very quickly dissipated. Where with other stories, it would be like a rolling coverage, you know.
Right.
And it just kind of gave me this impression of life somehow being cheaper, you know, in some parts of the world, in some scenarios. I just got that horrible feeling, you know. And then, of course, after the fact, when it had all happened, you got these companies sitting around a table at the inevitable press conference, and, you know, you got company CEOs or whoever, like, sitting there with their heads bowed and that, which is all well and good, but as per usual, you know, the response was kind of token gestures and, oh, we'll set up a fund and stuff like that. But that, to me, wasn't nowhere near the answer. You know, the answer is to change the culture of supply chains in the world. You know, all these multinationals are making huge profits, you know, and it's that distribution of wealth thing, you know. It's not filtering down to the places where the supply chains need to be, well, humanized, basically. So that was the catalyst, basically. And then of course, the concept spread out a little bit into modern day slave labor, because, to be honest, there's a certain amount of people who still think that slavery kind of died out in the 1800s in the cotton fields, you know, in the southern US. But of course, slavery is alive and well, and it exists in more subtle forms now, as well as in the traditional forms. Mm-hmm. And there was a rather interesting report, actually, a few days ago that says there are more people that could be classed as enslaved, you know, through labour or whatever, right now in the world than what there ever has been throughout time. And think of that, you know, considering all the stuff about slaves being taken from Africa in the 1800s, etc. I mean, when it's frightening, you know. So that was the thrust of the album, basically, with a few side things kind of floating around that central point.
Well, and you had mentioned India there to begin it all, and, you know, there's that god-awful caste system that they have there.
Yeah, we cover that on the album, actually. There's a song about the caste system. but it's not on the album itself. It's actually an extra track that we're going to use later on. But yeah, we cover the caste system, because to think that if we are trying to learn as a human race and we are trying to be more humane, I mean, what good can a system do that means you're basically screwed by virtue of birth? You know, that you're denied access to education, to healthcare, to accommodation, you know, and basically you have to walk around shoveling other people's shit, you know, literally in some circumstances. I mean, how can that be good for anybody, you know?
All right, so the new album, let's talk about the sonic side of it. Every Napalm Death album has a unique feel to it. From your perspective, what sets Apex Predator apart from your previous efforts in terms of creating something new?
I just think it's a couple of steps forward. I mean, I find it hard because the album's so fresh. I couldn't really give you a more specific explanation than that, really. I mean, it's just, Napalm has a couple of sides to it. It has the fast, traditional approach, you know, real off the rails kind of attack. And then we have a very, very kind of ambient, sort of quite maudlin, quite depressive kind of edge, you know, very queasy edge, you know, with that dissonant sort of sound. And I think that the two styles together, like mixing better than and more closely than they ever have, I just think that very thing has kind of pushed it forward a little bit. And I think the intro that we've done to the album as well is something that we haven't done for a long time. I mean, we have done those kind of intros before, but this one's even more kind of, I guess, inventive, you know, quite simply just inventive, you know, in terms of the percussion and also the vocal. I did a different kind of vocal on it as well, although, in my opinion, no less extreme, you know.
Right. Now, did you guys try anything new or unusual in creating this record, like recording in stages, different techniques, stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. Well, we did. I mean, this album was recorded over a year, basically. It was, and when I say that, it doesn't mean we faffed around for 12 months straight in a studio. It means we did it in 3, 4 or 5 sections. And the idea of that was to try and get some different variants of production going, because one of the things that lets extreme music down, I think, sometimes is the fact that there are a lot of bands just kind of set the desk, you know, if you understand that phrase. Mm-hmm. They set the desk and then they just play their stuff. So everything is at a consistent level, and that to me is too robotic, you know, and too mechanical. So we wanted to kind of get away from that, you know. We wanted to have a bit of variance in there. And if you listen, some of the album's got a very spacious ambient edge to it, and some of it's that more traditional, dense, thick, you know, right in your eyeballs kind of grind, if you want, attack sound, you know.
Now, when I was listening to the record, as usual, I'm always listening to Shane and Mitch's riffs, and they are such underrated guitar players and such brilliant riff writers, and they've done it again on Apex. Were there a couple of riffs on this album that when you heard them for the first time, you're just sort of shaking your head in awe going, how do they do this shit?
Yeah, sure, exactly. And, you know, if I can, just so it doesn't sound like supremely arrogant, if I just take one step out of the band for a second and say that I agree with you, I think those guys creatively, Shane and Mitch, are fucking amazing guitarists. They come up with stuff that I don't hear anybody else do. I mean, sure, you know, we follow a certain trusted way of doing things that we like to do, you know, and there are very familiar riffs within that, but there's also ones that come up to counterbalance that just hit home, you know, straight away. And it's very difficult to do that sometimes. But yeah, I just think to myself sometimes, like, man, you know, that is sung or whatever it might is so good, you know, with those riffs and obviously when you get that, it's a pleasure to write to, you know, because you get a lift, you know, just from the nature of the material that you're putting lyrics down on top of.
This deep in a Napalm Death's career, you guys continue to make more brutal, more creative albums. How do you continue to evolve yet remain true to that Napalm Death signature?
Oh, to be honest, mate, it's just a natural thing. I mean, it's like riding a bike. You know, once you do it, you tend not to forget. And I think there's I think it wouldn't be too pretentious to say that there is a real chemistry between us, you know, as the four people. We understand each other's techniques, each other's approach, much of which is just very spontaneous and very natural. And we just seem to be able to glue it all together, you know, and it just works that way. I mean, while we've been with Century Media, I think arguably it's been our most, you know, productive period in terms of the quality of the stuff, you know, for many years within the period before that. So,
right.
Yeah, it's something, you know, I guess we're on a bit of a roll, you know, and, of course we have those worries when we go into a session. We're always kind of thinking, well, you know, is this stuff good enough? You know, are people going to like it? You naturally, you try not to have those feelings. You try not to analyse things that closely, but you just do. In the back of your mind, you're just worried slightly about whether it's going to have the same impact of your previous album. But it always seems to work out in the end.
Right.
Know?
Now, you guys are getting ready to go out on tour for this album, the Through Space and Grind tour with Voivod, Exhumed, Iron Reagan, Black Crown Initiate, and some special guests on certain dates. That's a lot of bands for one show. How do you feel about regular tours featuring 4, 5, 6 bands a night?
Well, I think when you're in the small to medium band genre as we are, you know, I think you have to make the tours attractive, you know. You have to, because I'll be honest with you, Napalm's doing fantastically well in the States right now, which is why we're coming to the States first on this album tour when it starts in January. Mm-hmm. You know, we decided that as we've got the momentum that we want to, it would be good to put, Europe can live without us for a little while. You know, they've seen plenty of us in the last year or so, and we just wanted to come to the States first. So, I mean, and to be honest with you, if not, even given that momentum that we've got, Napalm going out on its own with one support band just wouldn't cut it with people, I don't think. If people want to see more, they want to see nice, almost mini festival bills, you know, with lots of bands on and lots of mixture of stuff. And that's what they like, you know, and if that's what people want to see, that's what they'll get, you know. So it is hard, though, to put together a bill that's eclectic enough to appeal to, you know, a range of people within the spectrum of extreme music, you know, for it not to get too diluted, you know. And I think it's going to go well, you know. I think it's a good lineup, you know. And it helps that there's 2 headliners on there as well, you know, because there's Voivod and Napalm, you know, as co-headliners or whatever. So I think that really helps. It strengthens our case, Napalm's case as a band, and you know, I think it's an all-round good thing. Yeah,
it's a fantastic lineup. So before we get out of here, it's 25 years coming up here just in a few weeks. We're going to get into 2015, which makes it 25 years since your debut album, Harmony Corruption, with the band. Can you sort of take us back to recording that album?
Sure. But of course, just to be pedantic, I wouldn't exclude, obviously, the 2 albums before them, because they are, you know, for me, milestones. But I get what I guess you're just referring to my time in the band as opposed to Napalm as a whole.
Oh, no, I'm looking at Napalm as a whole, but that happened to be your first album in the band, and I sort of wanted maybe your memories, anything that stood out recording that. You know what,
Rustin, honestly, when I did Harmony Corruption, the vocals, I was shit-faced, to be honest. I'll be totally honest with you. I couldn't say otherwise. I did the vocals on Harmony Corruption in about the time as you could have 3 or 4 spins of the record. I must be honest. I did them in one afternoon, you know, all the way right to finish. And like I say, I was shit-faced, you know. I don't even remember. I remember doing a couple of the songs, or if I, you know, you get those things that stick in your mind. Right. I remember doing a couple of songs, but most of it I just don't, you know. And I think it's, the vocals came out pretty well, you know, all that considered. But overall, with that recording, I just wish it would have had a different production, you know, because I think it's a little thin, you know, and that's not just because it's a 25-year-old album now. It's because even at the time it was a bit thin, and I wouldn't blame anybody for that. I'd say that we went to Morris Sound. We were encouraged to go by Earache at the time, but I think that we were lumped in with the Florida death metal thing, wholesale in production. everything. I just don't think it fitted with the Napalm attack, you know. And I certainly wouldn't blame, and specifically Scott Burns for it, because Scott did a great job. He was a brilliant guy. He was brilliant with us, you know. But I just don't think that production suited the band. Had we somehow been able to lift the production off Utopia Banished and put it on Harmony Corruption, I would have liked the album a bit better, I think. I'm not saying Harmony Corruption is a bad album song-wise. I just don't think the production was ideal, you know, for what we were trying to achieve.
Throw you guys into a studio with Steve Albini. That would be something. So.
Oh, yeah. Trust me, Rustin, I've spoken about that before on occasion, and I would love to do that. You know, trust me, I would love to do it, you know.
Awesome. Barney, before we get out of here, the last question. The year's coming to a close. What are two or three of your standout albums this year that are sort of sticking with you?
Oh, mate, you know what? I have to confess that I haven't really listened to anything this year. And as a music fan, that grieves me greatly. But the thing is, as we talked about during the interview, Napalm was so all-consuming this year with writing the album over 12 months. I just didn't get a chance to listen to anything. I can give you two, though, and they're two recent ones, because obviously we not long ago finished with the kind of process of the album. So there's a couple of things that I managed to sneak into the end of the year.
Lay it on us.
And I can give you those. The first one is an album by, and you will know us by, Trail of Dead. Have you heard that band at all?
I haven't.
They're kind of they're kind of extreme, but it's more of a weird kind of, I don't know, off-kilter kind of rock band. You know, they're really good. I can't remember what the new album's called, but you'll be able to look it up somewhere. So if you, there's that one. There's also, actually, I heard the new album by Valenfire the other day, because obviously being on Century Media, they gave us a couple of things when I went over to do press. The Valenfire album, which has got Greg from Paradise Lost on it. Mm-hmm. It's called Splinters. It's quite very, very Celtic Frost sort of thing, and that was very good, I thought. And then to give a shout out to a friend of mine from Japan, a band called Turtle Island, wow. Which is like I forget how many pieces he's got, but it's something like a 24-piece orchestra, and they just play very bizarre kind of world music, I suppose. And yeah, so that's a little bit of a curveball for you at the end of that. I forget the name of his album as well, but anyway, the band's called Turtle Island, and it'd be their latest release. I can't remember off the top of my head the name of it.
We'll track it down. Barney Greenway, sure. Napalm Death, the new album Apex Predator, Easy Meat, out January 26th here in the States. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you got about 300 other interviews to do, so I will let you get out of here and have a fantastic day, my friend.
And same to you, mate. Same to you.